Hey there guys, my name is Cris Urzua and I want to welcome you to the third episode of the Cris Urzua podcast. In this episode, we're going to be interviewing Nick Kolenda. Who is Nick? Nick Kolenda is a writer and researcher in consumer psychology. He's the author of 3 best-selling books, Methods of Persuasion, Imagine Reading This Book, and The Tangled Mind. He used to work as a stage mentalist, and now every week he shares fascinating academic studies with over 65,000 marketers on his email list. Nick is a person that I've been reading his newsletter for many years now, and I loved his academic approach to marketing. So you can expect a very geeky, very strategic interview right now that I hope you enjoy. With that said, welcome to the Cris Urzua podcast. Mr. Nick Kolenda, it's a pleasure, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, glad to be here, Chris. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
It's an honor, man. I've been a big fan of your academic research for a long time now, like we were just speaking about. So, Mr. Nick Kolenda, tell me, what are you researching right now? What's got you passionate in the world of consumer psychology?
So I love pricing. I love the psychological aspects of pricing, of how we're not just influenced by the economic standpoint, where if you can just change these visual sensory cues about a price, it can just feel cheaper, even if that same numeral just stays the same. And so one thing I want to test, have you heard this concept, angel pricing?
No, I haven't.
A lot of people keep reaching out to me, asking me if it would be effective. So it's an example would be like a price of 888, just using all of the same digits in the price, 666, 777.
Okay.
Apparently it's becoming a trend that more and more marketers are starting to use it and swear by it. But I feel like from the academic research side, it would be less effective. And I had this interesting hypothesis. So are you familiar with the Gestalt principle of similarity?
No, please educate me.
So let's say you just see a string of digits. It goes 1111 and then 888 and then 11111. Mm-hmm. Because of the similarities of those 8s, your brain is just going to naturally look at that, group it, and it's going to stand out. It's mostly with like shapes and colors, where if you see a string of blue circles surrounded in a sea of red circles or whatever, mm-hmm. your brain just groups things into what looks visually similar.
Okay.
And so if we see 888 together, our brain is going to group that together into a spatial magnitude because of that grouping principle. Mm-hmm. And so a digit, a price like 869 or 896, where all of the digits are distinct, we don't really experience that grouping effect. And so with 888, or if you're repeating the same digits in a price, I'm very curious if that triggers that grouping effect, where our brain lumps those digits together and it brings in this concept of spatial magnitude into the equation. Mm. And so rather than just a numerical price that's kind of abstract in nature, mm-hmm. there's now a sensory magnitude to that price where it just feels larger because there's this additional concept of size associated with it.
Interesting.
It's kind of similar to another pricing effect where if you increase the visual size of a price, it feels larger. Mm-hmm. And your brain, there's a concept called misattribution, mm-hmm. where if there's a visual size to the price, your brain attributes a numerical size.
So
where
if the number is way bigger in print, then it will be perceived as a higher price than if it's smaller?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Where your brain just kind of is evaluating the price and it doesn't really know the size of it. So it needs to use this abstract or needs to subjectively evaluate the size. So internally you think, how big is this price? You look at the price, and if it's very big, you think, something just feels very big about this price. But you don't really notice or realize that this feeling of bigness is coming from the visual size. And so your brain just thinks, oh, it must be the numerical size. So this price just must be larger. And so, do I want to buy that? Well, it feels like a large price.
It's interesting because there's a lot more to pricing than just people making a comparison of, hey, money-wise, no, is it expensive or cheap? And actually what you're telling us right now, like the size of how the number is represented or how big is the number will affect that in the background when making a decision. One question that I had for you, and this angel pricing, from what I understood, just to recap, is if I do 666, 888, 999, the mind kind of assimilates that it has a lower value or it's more accessible because by not having different numbers, it just interprets them as one maybe, or as something easier to understand?
I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that when all of the digits are the same, your brain visually groups it into this visual grouping. So in addition to the numerical size, there is now a visual size associated with that price because your brain is visually grouping it. Whereas if all of the digits are different, your brain doesn't visually group anything. So you're only having that numerical size. So by making all of the digits the same, you're entering a visual size into the equation in addition to that numerical size. So you could be exacerbating subconsciously that inherent size of the price. There's been a lot of other studies showing that these subconscious traits about a price, even the syllables, the number of syllables in the digits can make a price just feel larger. Where 7 has 2 syllables, so if you insert that into a price, internally you speak the price, and so if it's longer to say internally, your brain just thinks that it's inherently bigger. And so there's all of these sensory cues that could go into a price beyond the economic number itself.
That's incredible. So just to recap, one of them is the size of the print, the other one's how long is it to pronounce the actual number. And one of the pricing strategies that I think most people will relate to is going to the supermarket and seeing everything that instead of $200 will be $199, right? Or $197. And I've seen some of your research on this. Is that strategy, first of all, was it something like scientifically proved that increased sales since the beginning? And nowadays, where it kind of gives you the feeling like, I've seen this a million times, it's $200, right? Is it still working, or has it lost effectiveness throughout the time?
You'd think that consumers nowadays would be so saturated with these prices that they would stop being effective. But there were just 2 recent meta-analyses done, which means that they looked at all of these studies that have looked at this effect. Just to, like, there's been a lot of replication issues in psychology, and so one individual study can be less credible than it was before, just because there are more questions. And so they do meta-analyses to kind of bring a strong validation to something. And so there were just 2 of these recently published that looked at all of the studies on this effect, confirming that it's still very much effective. And there used to be a supposed drawback to it, where if you use that type of price, the quality of the product would seem a little bit lower, where, it's less quality because of this type of price. But the 2 new studies show that that's not the case. There is no drawback or perceived quality loss in using what's called a charm price. So like that type of $199 price.
Interesting.
And the mechanism is also really interesting too. Like, it seems like it should be the same because it's only a penny difference, but just because of that left digit change, instead of anchoring to $2, once you see that 1, your brain just immediately places it near that 1, and it just feels so much cheaper, even though it's not really cheaper.
I love it. And being like we were talking before starting this, a very practical marketer, where I've been doing not a lot of academic research, but I've been to masterminds and they share these tidbits and I kind of tie them up all together. Another thing that I don't know if it's a myth, but that I've heard over and over and over again is that the number 7 has, I don't know, like a magic effect at the end of things that will increase sales. Have you heard of that before? Or is it just me?
People always tell me, like, I had this conversation many times where marketers swear by the number 7, but academic research would like kind of say otherwise. But because I've heard it from so many marketers at this point, I would be kind of inclined to trust the marketers just because of the sheer number of people that have sworn by them. And I kept trying to think of reasons why 7 could be persuasive. The only thing I can think of is that prices seem cheaper when they're very specific. And so 7 has that strong specificity about it. And so maybe it just feels cheaper. I don't know. I think it's still a mystery. And so I think we academics have still yet to validate and explain the reason why they may or may not be effective.
Incredible. And you bring another subject to mind. Like, I've heard a lot of research where they talk about fonts, right? Like what fonts will increase sales, right? Whether it's a serif or sans serif. And that brings us to the subject of shapes, right? Like some shapes are more square and rigid, some are more curved and circular, like even with comparing the 8, right, against the 7. Have you done any research on just like maybe like square structured versus curved structure in numbers or in letters?
There's one study, I believe, that showed that a sharp font would be more appealing for a very specific number, but a more round font, visually round font, would be better for a round number, like 50. And there's a really interesting mechanism behind that of how we conceptualize numbers and how we incorporate this type of sensory traits to these abstract concepts. It's probably too in the weeds to explain fully, but I dive into the Tangled Mind. I'm not sure if you read it, but there was that study about sharp fonts better for sharp prices, round fonts better for round prices.
Interesting. I love it. And I've got to tell you a quick story. Many years ago, I did a conference tour in Colombia. We did it around 7 dates, right? And we had this 4-hour event where we thought our marketing and sales strategies. And my pricing strategy was we had one ticket and we sold it for $97, right? And to be very candid, the strategy was one of my first tours ever, and it was barely profitable. Like I made some money, but it was not really a home run. And then somebody introduced to me the concept of a dummy pricing, right? And I started kind of like digging deep into that, and I don't know what
the decoy effect.
Exactly, the decoy effect, where they use a case study, the New York Times, a lot, like or a newspaper, right?
The Economist.
The Economist, digital, and then print and digital, and etc. And the strategy that I came up with that really works well, and I'm going to explain it in proportions, right? Like ratios. We have one product, now the conference, but instead of one ticket at $97, which would make 100% of my sales $97, I give 3 different tiers of that ticket, right? And the smallest one, let's call it $97, would be 1x, right? Then the one in the middle would have a high increase, and it would go maybe up to like 2.9x, right? So if this is 100, this one would be like 297, right? Or 277. And then the third one would go up. If the first one was 1, the other one was 2.8x, the other one would be 3x. So it would have a very small increase. So I would have 1x, 2.8x, and 3x. And then in the bonus strategy, like what I added to each of these tiers, the first one would be very basic, just like the core components. The one in the middle would have one very big bonus that justified this 2x almost increase. But then the third one would have the same bonus, but then it would just have like 5 different extra things. And then I did a tour again, and that tour became incredibly profitable because at least this was my interpretation. What I realized is that there's always people that want to spend more. So when you give them 3 tiers, they're not limited to the $97 tier. They can spend in the $397 tier if they want it. And that strategy has really helped me because it's very reliable. Every time I do that, and with different amounts of money invested in Facebook ads or whatever, I always get like 30-40% in the higher range. There's always like someone crazy, like 5% that buys a decoy. There always is that guy. And I've called them and I have to ask them, like, why did you buy? And they were like, it's what I needed. I never understand why they do it. And then I have like 50% on the smaller one. So that's my experiences with pricing. Have you heard of the decoy before, or what do you think about it?
It's amazing how much relativity is involved with decision making. We think we make decisions in these absolute economic terms, but we really just make decisions by comparing things to each other. And so it's if you add in that worse product, it just makes the existing core product just seem better in comparison, and that seem better in comparison helps the absolute evaluation of it.
So it's like context, right? Now context affects a lot of what you're doing. Have you read this book Persuasion by Robert Cialdini?
Oh yeah.
What do you think about it? What's your biggest take of it?
Yeah, I think it's an utilized method of when I wrote Methods of Persuasion. I kind of started by priming their mindset, kind of getting people into a mindset where they're more receptive to persuasion. I agree. I think that's a really underutilized approach to persuasion. We always think of persuasion as in the request, in the moment, but we forget about the mindset leading up to that. Those pre-strategies can be very persuasive to put somebody in that mindset where when you then present all of the information, that mindset has conditioned them to be more receptive to that.
Love it. I remember an example they gave, like they had a mattress selling website, right? And the front page had like a brick background and a mattress. And they changed it to an actual like set of clouds and things that looked very comfortable and stuff. And that increased conversion rate when it comes to clicks and stuff. So it's incredible. Do you have any other examples of how one could maybe increase sales or like case studies of persuasion?
I always love the study called a which to choose mindset, where when study participants just chose the preferred animal that they liked between a hippo and an elephant, they became more likely to buy a product later because just that mere choice activated a which to choose mindset where people go through two stages. They want to know whether to buy and which to buy. So if you have them make that any type of choice, even if it's completely irrelevant to the decision, it gets them into that which to choose stage where they just skip the whether to choose stage and go to that process. So it's kind of like that type of conditioning into that persuasion type of approach.
Wow, that's interesting. So just getting them on the decision-making mindset will increase the probability of them making an actual decision, right?
Getting them to choose between any two things, then if you replace those with products, because you've already conditioned them to choose, they've already imagined that, they've already made that choice, and so it's much easier to imagine choosing between those new products that you present to them.
I love it. And hey, when I was researching your background for this interview a little bit, one interesting thing came up that I didn't know about you, and it's that you were a stage mentalist. And I saw like a 1-minute video of you like guessing these crazy numbers on stage with people, and people just going like in total awe. What is being a stage mentalist, and how did you end up doing that?
So with the mentalism portion, so I claimed that I used psychology to influence people's thoughts and then read their mind. And so I built a whole stage show around it. There's a couple clips on YouTube like that. Behind the scenes, it was all principles of sleight of hand magic. So I wasn't actually using psychology to influence their thoughts. But in building this stage show, that's how I became interested in using psychology to influence behavior. Because I needed to kind of research and play this kind of character on stage, I just developed such a strong interest and fascination for all of this research. And so the stage mentalism and that kind of act dovetailed into me just researching this for a living and kind of then applying it to marketing. And really, I was a double major in marketing and psych in undergrad. And I just fell into that, a passion for that, and just kind of pursued that, transitioned out of the mentalism act and did that.
The reactions that you must have gotten from the crowd, they must have been crazy.
Yeah, I was really happy with the stage show. It was a really good performance.
I love it. I saw the like the faces on people when you guess the numbers. It's crazy. And I had another question for you, like in marketing especially, and pretty much everywhere right now. But let's talk about marketing. You always hear stats, right? And there's even like the meme, the joke of like 9 out of 10 statistics that you hear in marketing are fake, right? But it gets to be frustrating because I see a lot I'm very used to going, because I've been here for a long time, and just going to the fundamentals and sticking to what works. But then I see a lot of new people in marketing that are very, very excited, right? And I've got this new study that tells me that 9 out of 10 times that you do this, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes they base their whole strategy of something that's not really real at all, right? Because there's a lot of fake statistics. Is there anything that you recommend so people can actually maybe reject certain things quickly without having to do 6 hours of research? Or how would you go as to validating like a scientific claim when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, it's a little beyond my expertise, but if I had to guess, maybe some type of third-party validation or certification or some type of external unbiased source, which there are a few, maybe like Trustpilot, something along those lines where you can go to a third-party source to validate, and maybe even making something like required or something like that. Because I feel like disinformation is becoming a problem, and even those like third-party sources, you run into problems where, how can you trust those sources? And it's going to become an even bigger problem, I imagine, down the road.
With AI.
Yeah, with AI, especially with AI. I could be like, this is going to be an AI like generated like version of me. Like
it's not here.
Like I have issues like with physical issues with my voice, and I just cloned my voice this week. Like uploaded videos, and now I can just enter a script and it can deliver like that script in my own voice. And now I can produce videos even if I can't really speak anymore.
What app did you use to do that? Like,
I think it was play.ht, but there are a bunch of them nowadays that you can just kind of upload your past content and create your own voice clone.
That is amazing. I love it. And you're right. Like in every area of life, I just, in one of our previous episodes, we had John Benson on, who's a great copywriter. And we were just talking about, he's also very into fitness and dieting. And we're talking how, let's say, nutrition wise, it's all misinformation. And then you read one book and it has scientific approval, but you go to Google and there's scientific approval against his scientific backing.
Yeah.
And science has been very biased, and it's hard to go. And usually what I do is just the fact that you get a source, right? If you get a source, you check the university or wherever, but then still you have to ask yourself, like, how big was this test, right? It was, I don't know, there was a case with a Netflix documentary that was about fitness that just spoke like beautiful things about being a vegetarian. But then it turned out that he had tested 10 athletes.
Yeah.
What does 10 athletes tell you? Like worldwide, it's a very small statistic, no?
Yeah, even like I feel like there's a problem with marketers not having trustworthy information, but it's even on the academic side. I used to go by academic journals, like whether this is an A journal, like a really reputable journal, but at least the field in psychology is experiencing that replication crisis where they're trying to replicate all of these very seminal studies from decades ago, and they can't replicate. Only half of them are replicating. And so even on the academic side, we really don't know. Like lately, in the past few years, I think they've made significant progress in making research more credible. They're now requiring researchers to pre-register their studies, so they can't, which means that they need to commit to however they're going to analyze the data beforehand. So they can't do these statistical techniques later called p-hacking to try to manipulate the results in their direction. And so I feel like lately the quality of the research is going up. And so hopefully we're on a better trend for that.
Love it, man. And I know that you have a big investigation and research and a lot of knowledge when it comes to naming, like brand names, right?
Yeah, I love the psychology of
and
names.
Dude, I need your help with that because I have a history of putting the worst names ever to every single one of my companies, right? So just to give you an example, my first company, which is right now, its name is Mass Academy, MAS Academy. We're an online academy that caters with courses and online education to people all over the Hispanic world. We have clients in pretty much every single country of the world. They're all speak Spanish. But the first name of it was Mindset and Skills Academy. And I ran with it for like 3 years, catering to Hispanic, Spanish-speaking clientele. And I decided I had to change it when I got a testimonial from a guy that I love to death that was like, hey, Chris, I still can't pronounce a fucking name on your academy, but it changed my life. And then I went like, okay, mindset and skills, let's just put it with MAS, which MAS means more than Spanish, and then academy, and that has like a very better symbolism. I feel like it's more like achieving more, wanting more, desiring more, or getting more results, because we speak a lot about business. But what are some best practices that you would suggest when it comes to naming a company or a product?
So as a disclaimer, I'm really good at the science of names. I feel like I've researched all of the methodologies and research papers that exist on naming. And I feel like the methodology I compiled is the best, most scientifically sound methodology out there. But I've realized that there is still an art to the science of naming. And I'm not good at that art, I've come to find. But last week, I just kind of made constraints in ChatGPT following the naming science that I had. And I found that it can generate really good results following that type of instructional template. And so even if I'm not good, if you follow that type of science, I think there are tools out there that can help you generate those names. But maybe the biggest recommendation I would have is I think I call it a naming matrix, but I just created this 2x2 matrix that categorizes all brand names into two dimensions, whether it resembles a word and whether it's relevant. So an example of a non-word that's irrelevant would be something, just a made-up word like Zynga or something like that.
Uber.
Or Uber, yeah.
Okay.
There would be a word that's irrelevant, like Apple. Apple is a real word, but it means nothing to the product. An associative name would be a word that is relevant, a non-word that is relevant, like Facebook. Like it's not a word, but you still know what it is. And then a descriptive name is Mindsets and Skills Academy. So I think one of the biggest takeaways is to never choose a descriptive name.
Okay.
Is what I found. I think it can work in certain situations, but it's hard to tangibilize that type of name because it's a description and not a concrete entity. So it's really hard for your brain to build associations to it because we don't conceptualize it as a name or we don't conceptualize it as an entity.
So the brain stores it as a description, not an actual tag or a name. Like one example that comes to mind is, and tell me if this applies to the descriptive name category, but maybe Kentucky Fried Chicken.
That I feel
They're
like
kind of
maybe
describing it, right?
I feel like over time with a descriptive name, if it can work, I feel like it starts forming where once you say, or even like KFC or Kentucky Fried Chicken, I think over time with enough exposure to it, it's easier for your brain to categorize it as an entity. But that journey into branding, it becomes much more arduous and difficult, and you need a lot more exposures to create those associations to your brand. And it's going to be harder to remember.
That one's interesting because I remember that the first time that I got, like, somebody told me, hey, did you know that Uber is here? Like that word doesn't tell me anything about the service they provide. And I had to ask the other person, like, what's Uber? And they had to go through this process of educating me on what Uber is. And it's like a taxi, and they use metaphors. It's like a taxi, but you pick it up with an app, And in my mind, I thought that might be a little bit more challenging, right? Because you have to go through a process of learning or discovering what the actual thing behind the name is. But once you get it, it just stays.
There are challenges to that, what I call a neologistic name, but the benefit to those types of names is the empty canvas, where if you start with a made-up word without any pre-existing associations, you can craft the exact type of meaning that you want to it. And so it's much more easy to instill the associations that you want. Now, so there are benefits and drawbacks to like each type of name. An associative name might be more important when you need relevance into the equation, where you can kind of communicate the idea in that inherent vessel, if you will. A deviant name like Apple might be better for creative, like industries, where Apple, because it's so irrelevant, it just sparks like a creativity about it because you wouldn't think of it. And so it just has this internal meaning to it.
And you have a book called Imagine Reading This Book, right?
Yes.
And you talk about a lot about that. I think I read an article that you wrote talking about how to choose words that are easy to imagine. Can you tell us what that is about?
Yes, a lot of people will say like a vague word, like their product is durable, but durable doesn't have any, like it seems concrete, but when you imagine durable, there's not really like a concrete image. Like, what do you mean by durable? Can it withstand damage? Can you drop it and it won't break? Does it last a long time? There are a lot of different associations and meaning. So there's not one concrete mental image that you imagine when you say durable.
It's very vague, right? It can mean a lot of things for a lot of people.
Or even like I apply this to motivation in the book. A lot of the examples focus on motivation. So if you put study in your calendar, you're going to have trouble imagining that, because what does that mean to study? If you put something like review chemistry exams, when you look at that and think about doing that task, you can easily imagine it. And if you can imagine it, it just feels easier. And the book dives into and argues that that type of mechanism is the mechanism for how we make decisions. When we are deciding whether or not to do something, we need to know the value and ease of that decision. We need to simulate what's called the outcome and the process. And so in order to gauge whether or not we want to do something, we're going to imagine ourselves doing it. During that imagery that we're experiencing, we know how we feel during it. We can gauge the emotional value of it. And that's how we know whether or not it would be worth it. Once we simulate that outcome, we then simulate the process. How easy is it to do? Can we imagine executing and performing that? If we can imagine those steps, then we can, it strengthens our desire to perform that. And that's why BJ Fogg does a lot of this research, and this is what he's known for. But making things easier can increase the persuasiveness of something. So even if you don't actually strengthen the persuasiveness, just the mere ease, even if you move something to where it's easier to grab in a kitchen, like healthier food, if you just move it to be an easier to grab location, we just desire it because we can imagine grabbing, and it just feels much easier to do.
It's interesting, man. And one of the things that comes to mind when we're talking about everything regarding psychology and marketing and just moving to a different subject is luxury branding. Like a lot of people will always, and this is something that a lot of people approach me with, like, hey, I want to sell a high ticket service. I want to sell something that's very exclusive. I've heard some myths. There was an interview that went viral with, I don't know, one of the top directors of like a luxury like fashion brand. And they were saying stuff like each centimeter of a smile in a model will actually drop the price, right? Like, no, models have to be like super serious and aspirational instead of warming and welcoming. And what do you think about how can people, or one easy win, or something that people need to understand when it comes to promoting something that's luxurious?
Yeah, I was surprised about that too. I just wrote a guide on luxury branding, and I went through all of the luxury sites. I'm not a luxury guy, so I never understood the appeal. And so that was the first time I really studied those sites. And I was surprised at how mean a lot of the models look.
Yeah, they're not friendly. Like you walk through a fashion place and you're intimidated, and they do it on purpose. Like people are going to get mad at this comparison, but when you walk into a church, like everything is built so big, so huge, it's kind of like meant to intimidate you to a certain point, to give you respect to the Lord or wherever. And there's a lot of history behind that. But when you walk to a fashion place, and not to compare them exactly because they're totally different things, you also get that intimidation thing. Like, maybe you question yourself, like, am I up to this level? Am I worth it? Is it worth it? I don't know. What do you feel about that? Why do they do it?
Yeah, when we feel like we can't have something, that they're better than us, acquiring that product will put us in that elite category. And so I don't agree with it, but if I agree that it's effective and that it works.
And when it comes to marketing, it's funny, but psychology is what it is at the end of the day, and human biology is what it is, right? And then we have to understand it, and based on our ethical compass and our values, make the decisions of which strategies we decide to actually use and how to use them. That actually brings me to a good question. In all of your research, what is one example of shady marketing, of one thing that you go like, oh, psychology, like maybe this one, right? Like just making people feel a little bit inferior and having them aspire to be like you is not really good. Is there anything that you've, like a case study or research that you found that you're like, oh, that one's on the dark side?
Maybe just multi-level marketing or those types of shady marketing practices. There was a study recently that looked at what draws people to multi-level marketing. It's an intuitive thinking style and the thought that you can get rich. And so I feel like it can just cater to certain people, and it can turn out bad for them. But I think that would be the one, or dark patterns in UX, where I'm never against manipulating or tricking customers into anything. And I feel like some websites will do certain things to trick you into signing up, or all of these other.
What do you mean by
things.
A dark pattern?
Like designing the interface in a way, or let's say like making the cancellation process overly complicated and difficult to do.
Oh man, that sucks.
Yeah.
And when you were saying right now with the MLM marketing, that's very interesting, because there's some companies with MLM that have been around for 70 years, right? And their compensation model is not a pyramid, and they're doing good, right? And within their spectrum. But then there's others that are just crazy Ponzi schemes. And one of the things that they have against their whole system is because they're just sending out a message and looking for distributors. How can you control that the distributor on level 37 is actually pitching the product the right way? Because like information will just start going whatever, and then you have people pitching get rich in 24 minutes.
Yeah. I think I don't know anything about MLM to make any assertions, but I just know that they often there are a lot of people who are drawn toward MLM that shouldn't be in that situation, and it just turns out bad for them. And I feel like a lot of the shadier companies will cater to those types of people, and they know it's not going to benefit
predatory.
them. Predatory is a good word. Yeah.
Hey, and there's another thing that's interesting, the relationship between humor and marketing. Like, have you done any research on it? Does it increase sale? Because I feel like it's a double-edged sword. Like, one of my frustrated dreams is to be a stand-up comedian, right? And when I'm on stage and sharing like marketing stuff or sales stuff or business stuff, I always try to put humor into it. And to a certain point, it makes me feel more comfortable. I feel that it makes it easier on people when they're consuming content. But I'm not sure, how does it affect the conversion process? Have you done any research, or do you have any studies on that?
Yeah, research has confirmed that humor is effective in advertising. I forget what they've argued as the mechanism for it. If I had to guess, it would probably be a misattribution type of effect, where if you were laughing while seeing the brand, your brain is going to, kind of like classical conditioning, you're going to associate those positive emotions with this brand. And so, and another effect next to that, we engage in what's called reactance. If we believe that a marketer is trying to influence our behavior, we become even more resistant to that persuasion attempt. And so humor is a great strategy to deflect that, where it disarms people, where they don't feel like they're being sold to. And in that kind of disarmed mindset, we're more receptive to the advertising message.
And it kind of hijacks it, right? Because when we're in the middle of a sales process, you have the expectation to feel pressure, to be uncomfortable. You're going to be asked for a decision. But when that sales process becomes enjoyable, and you go like, oh, this is not that bad. It's actually pretty cool. I'm enjoying myself, right? And then you have that misattribution of maybe, hey, if these people can make me laugh, if I'm having a good time here, then the product must be good. That's an interesting effect. And I think we started doing something very funny in our social media recently, where we're doing a lot of business humor related stuff, right? So we'll grab a random viral video that already has a lot of approval from everybody, and we'll just reframe it in a way that it talks about business, right? And that's worked very, very well. It's actually helped us grow tremendously. And one other thing, and just going to another direction, and copywriting is a huge thing. Like the art of expressing ideas in a way that entices people or makes people to jump to decisions. And one of the biggest things is headlines, right? Like the power of a headline in an email title. Like 100% of the people that get the email will read the headline, but then some of them will open up the email. What best practices would you recommend when it comes to writing headlines?
I think it depends on the context. For that email example, let's say, I see a lot of marketers make the mistake where they try to incorporate something catchy and not gimmicky, but something eye-catching. But that very notion is opposite to what consumers want. So we have this concept called construal level, where I shouldn't frame it like that. All of the emails that you get from personal people, like personal connections that you would always open, how are they like? They're usually
very basic.
They're basic, short, straight to the point. That's what you're expecting. That's how you're categorizing what a personal email looks like. And so whenever something matches that type of schematic structure, you're like, oh, this is a personal email. And so I've sent out lots of emails, and I've noticed that too in my email marketing. When I do something long and kind of markety, like the open rate, click-through rate drops suddenly. But whenever I just do something very basic, like I just sent an email blast the other week called a new guide, or just something very basic, like the open rates are so much higher just because it just feels like a personal message.
I had read one case study that I think it was like the best marketing campaign ever or something like that, where Obama sent an email that the headline was, hey, H-E-Y.
Yeah,
And
I
it
remember
was
that.
Obama sending you that email. So that's funny. And I've actually replicated that where I send an email to our database just saying H-E-Y, hate. And it's very formal. And another thing that's interesting is the concept of pattern interrupts, right? So what I understand from it, and I don't know, are you familiar with the term?
I'm familiar with the term, but I forget what it means.
So in copywriting, and this is something that I've heard for a long time. They tell you that it's good to do a pattern interrupt. Like if people are reading an email, boom, an image, right? Or if you're looking at a video, then put something like really shocking in it. Okay. And that will have people that were kind of like drowsing off, well, like come back again. What's that about? And even right now with like TikTok and how reels are being elaborated, one of the recommendations that they give you is like have like every 3 seconds you have to have boom a different visual stimuli so that people actually pay attention to you. Then to add things up, there's this saying that every single like speaker in the universe that talks about marketing tells you that human beings now have a lower attention rate than goldfish, right? Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've heard
That's
it.
like that, and Starbucks doesn't sell coffee, it sells experiences. That are like the two most cliche quotes of any speaker out there in marketing. But do you agree, or have you like, is it necessary to do that, or how can we hold on to attention better?
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like my approach to content has changed since I started. When I first started, I would write these extremely long, in-depth guides that everyone I sent it to would go through and read. But over time, I felt like they're not as readable. Like if I were to send a very long guide today, not as many people, much fewer people versus even a few years ago are going to read it because they just don't have the attention span. And so now I'm sending out shorter but more frequent content because I feel like that's the more digestible and more preferred type of content. Do you find that too, like with courses too, especially, or like do people still have the attention span for courses, or they prefer like shorter, frequent content?
It's very interesting because I've had experiences where I buy a course and the first lesson is 2 hours long, and I go like, I'm never doing that, man. Like I don't get this positive reinforcement of like checking things off a list. And then I've had courses where each module has maybe 6 lessons, but they're all like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and I just get it just gets me on a roll, and I feel like I'm moving forward. So when I feel like I'm moving forward, I feel happier, I guess, and I feel more excited about it. I feel good about myself, and I continue doing it. So in a personal experience, I have felt that when things are short, it gives me that boost of like, you're doing good, Chris.
Completion. Yeah,
exactly. Keep on doing it. But also, like I mentioned, like if I had to like categorize my personality when it comes to like Friends or TV show characters, I would be Monica Geller, right? So I love lists and I love checking things off, right?
Yeah.
But then on the other side, I'm a big fantasy reader. I love fiction. And I just went through 3 novels that were each one of them like 1,000 pages long, and I just couldn't let them go, right? So one of the things I've heard that it's not like people do have attention span and can invest time in long format if it's extremely interesting. You're hooked. Because when I read fantasy, it's just like I don't want to drop it. It's like action. It's fast paced.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to business knowledge, I don't know. Like I've never found a way to like even I don't know if you read fiction, but I go very fast through fiction books and like academic research and stuff. It takes me a long time.
See, I'm the opposite. I'm not a fiction
really?
reader, but I'm just super fascinated with the boring academic research.
That's actually a superpower, man. That's a huge superpower. I love it. Awesome. And dude, just one last question. When it comes to like digital marketing, we always have to send people right from Facebook to a landing page to get their data and to create a database. And sometimes I see really horrible websites, like design-wise, right? They don't have, the colors don't match. They just give you like visual allergy, right, from seeing them, but that are very effective, right? What would you tell us that makes a good like user experience for a website, for example?
So maybe I'm a contrarian. I maybe those pages are effective, maybe because of the market fit or the value proposition is just so very good that they have the right audience with the right message that the page design doesn't matter. But I feel like in the majority of cases, I feel like that fit isn't going to be as strong, where the visual design is really important to communicate so many things. So I feel like design is one of the most important aspects, I'd say, just because of the misattribution effect. If we see a well-designed page, it's going to feel good. And if it feels good, we're going to think, oh, why does this feel good? Well, I guess they're more trustworthy. The product is better. All of these other additional reasons that we're going to attribute to something irrelevant, like the page design. It shouldn't matter, but our brain has trouble dissociating the emotions we feel from that well-designed page to the actual core rational components of it.
And now that you say that, it makes a lot of sense, because the examples that come to mind of really bad design but very effective websites are from a couple of friends and clients that I have that are very well established brands in social media. So usually their content is really good. Their value proposition is amazing. Plus they have this aura around them of like having millions of followers and just like maybe it's a warm audience that's coming to the landing page. So they're able to not be so good at design because they know that their audience has this like context of them being worth it.
Yeah, though maybe there might be one benefit of poor design, and I've noticed this in YouTube. If something is too well produced, it doesn't feel authentic. Where if something is less well produced, even though it's technically uglier, we think it's a real person doing this, and we simulate ourselves. We can empathize with him. We can immerse ourselves into that person more strongly just because it feels like us, like we're doing that.
Exactly.
Like it's like a peer. And so that could benefit, that could play a role in that type of web design approach. If something is poor designed, perhaps they think, oh, this is like a real guy who actually knows, like he has a street cred. He might not be this well-produced like company. This is like the real deal. Like it's more authentic. So in certain situations, it could have that perception perhaps.
Yeah, and it's funny because YouTube's a perfect example, right? When I YouTube something that I want solved and I see massive production, I go like, oh my God, it's going to be a 20-minute intro and this guy pitching something in the middle. But when I see like, I don't know, I Google something tech and it's this Indian guy with a really bad logo that's like, how to fix this issue, I know it's going to be 2 minutes and it's going to go straight to the point and I love it. Awesome, man. So, well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Nick. I had long wanted to have this conversation with you, and I love how knowledgeable you are and how open you are to share it. If there's one website, one social media, something that people must go and visit or do right now to know more about you, what would that be?
I would say subscribe to my free email newsletter every week. Every Friday, I just find the most interesting, most practical academic study and just summarize it in a very clear, easy to digest way. And a lot of people, it seems to resonate with a lot of people. And so that's what I would recommend.
Awesome. That's at nickkolenda.com, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Love it, man. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure, dude. And for everybody watching, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Cris Urzua podcast. See you soon.